me then, Doris. Give me the strength. Give me the strength. All right, today we are here to celebrate our brother Dummy Splash's first ever record label release. The Transparently There EP will be released on April 1st with Inward Records. Brother, I gotta ask you, how does that feel to hear?
Well, it's part of it is surreal. It feels really good. Given that I've invested and really found a passion in music, it's a huge milestone for me personally. So it feels good, but also surreal, right? It hasn't really hit me yet, but it's exciting.
Enjoy that surrealness, brother. I imagine one day there's the possibility that this is just another release on another month that comes with a different set of feelings, which I'm sure will be appreciated at that time. It's interesting because you and I both come from a background in IT sales. As far as I know, you're still in that world to some extent. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came into music passionately in terms of producing and what it's been like to balance your, corporate life with the Dummy Splash life?
Yeah, so it's it's hard to track, but I think for the past, I want to say almost 10 years, um, I had an app on my phone called Beatmaker Two, and I just relegated myself to the phone, and I would make little beats, right? But it was just it's just something I did for fun, but really kind of limited myself to that because at the time I said, well, if I get lost in this sauce, it's gonna distract me from what I'm trying to do now, which was my tech career. That's really where I spent my 20s. Like, hey, I want to be this tech guy, right? And I don't know what it was, um, but for some reason, in October 2019, I just said, "Fuck it, I want to I'm just going to do this, right? I'm going to get the software and some sort of entry level production equipment to set up at the house." And I hit up my buddy. He goes by Nanosaur. He's a producer. And I said, "Hey, man, can I just take you to Guitar Center? Can you help me get something that's, I can put out professional work from, but not, overinvest, not get anything
A
excessive."
proper starter kit.
Yeah, proper starter kit, exactly. So he and I went there, set up, bought what we needed, set up. He's a really good friend of mine, so he showed me the ropes a little bit on production. And from there, I really just totally immersed myself in it. um, you know, just whether that's modular stuff online, YouTube stuff, finding Ableton instructors, music instructors, just kind of like I just wanted to consume so much, right? I was so curious and I really wanted to understand it. I remain sort of on that course, but to your kind of original question, this is all while trying to maintain a career and a what I would say a pretty demanding one. As far as and you've worked in sales, anyone that works in sales, that you kind of not to sound morbid, but you kind of have a gun to your head. It's a lot of pressure to
Yep.
execute and deliver results, and it's measured incrementally throughout the week, even, right, even on a daily basis, depending on what time of year it is. At first I really kind of struggled because I liked music so much. It actually started taking away from my work, but then I kind of took a step back and kind of found some more organization, some more discipline around when to do things, what's important. I mean, because I need, you know, and the income. I'm married. It's not just about me, so I want to make sure that I'm maintaining the life that we have, but also dedicating myself to music. So it's that's sort of one aspect of it. Another really interesting thing that I'll mention here is that with music, it like before that I was like work, 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 party on the weekends, work, 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 get drunk, go to raves, and then just work. And when I introduced music, counterintuitively, I actually started performing better at work. Something about introducing the balance, and I think also taking work less seriously gave me some. I don't know how it really impacted it, but it did. I actually had like really sort of a the best year of my career, if you will, quantifiably, in sales, right? After the music was introduced. So it was just a really interesting observation. Something about introducing balance to my life actually helped in unexpected ways.
Wow. Yeah, I can see how that makes sense. I find that the more time I spend in a focused creative state, even if it's just for like 10 minutes in a day, it really clears my system, and sort of just puts me in the present moment. We could call that like the flow state, if you will. And I started to recognize that, I would have a bunch of shit on my mind about something I had to do in the next few days. And I would spend 3 hours while I'm doing other things, but it would just, this loop in my mind would be going on. And after a while, I realized that first loop may have some downloadable data that's worthy to us, but then it's just on repeat, and it's really eating my energy and my system. And I found a pathway in dance to just say, there'd be moments where it's like, I have so much to do. I need to do this. And I learned that if I just took 8 minutes to let go of it and dance and allow myself to just be here and drop all that stuff, it really put me in a better position to get the shit done. So I think maybe with you, you get locked so deep into creating music that it really gave you appropriate downtime from work. This is big. Like, I don't think we know, I'll speak for myself, but all my homies and fucking everybody, we don't know how to relax. So, like, we think we put work down, but then we're still thinking about it, checking the email, scrolling social
Right.
media, whatever it is. And if you really break it down to, like, your nervous system's reaction to these things, we're not actually always calm and recharging in that mode. So, yeah, that's a nice little tidbit there. Spend more time with your passions, and it doesn't have to necessarily take away from your profession, although on the surface level, we might just look at the time and energy and make deductions and such, but
Yep.
1 plus 1 doesn't always equal 2.
That's definitely the case here, and like I said, unexpectedly, but it was a nice
A little
surprise.
paycheck bonus, get a little boost, some more production equipment.
I wasn't mad.
You mentioned October 2019. I just want to take a moment to bring that to light and applaud your progress. I mean, if my math is correct, that's 2.5 years since you went to the store to buy the equipment, and now we're doing an interview highlighting your first ever release on a record label. Man, as far as I'm concerned, that's something to be proud of right there.
Dude, I appreciate that, and it's great to hear that. If I'm being honest, because I operate in a vacuum, right? So it's it's easy to get not really see where things are being measured and how you're being perceived externally, right? I'm in a room making beats, right? It's like I don't know how that's being perceived, and so especially from folks that are in the scene. I don't. Admittedly, a lot of my friends don't really like down tempo music or house music necessarily, and so having people who actually listen to music like this and hear them start to say, "Hey, this is cool." It's like, wow, okay, that means a lot to me, and it's I spend a lot of time making music. I actually counted like 30 to 50 hours a week easily. And so if you think about that, like not every year is the same, right? Maybe someone bought equipment at the same time that I did, but they only do it for 5 hours a week, right? Or whatever. But me, I happen to enjoy it enough and frankly at times obsess about it enough that I'll just get, in deep flow state like you're talking about, and I'll start at 7 a.m. I'll look up, it's like 9 o'clock. It's like, oh, I should start working, be done with work, have honestly at lunch I'll make some beats too if I can, and then have dinner with my wife, go on a walk, hang out, and then once it's later on in the evening I'll probably spend a couple more hours, and then on the weekends, I mean, I'm basically making beats the whole time, unless I go on a hike or something, or get dinner with the wife. That's so it's yes, 2.5 years, but like I said, it depends what you do with those 2.5 years.
You had mentioned in a previous conversation that you felt like you had a bit of a unique perspective coming into your artist life as you were a little bit older, or you felt like you were a little bit older than the average person who maybe starts in their early 20s or whatever it may be. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Maybe I'll say my version, right? And
Yeah.
I think that there was a lot of life lessons operating in corporate America that I didn't finish college. I kind of like somehow ended up in tech, worked my way into made that into a career. And maybe people might learn this in college that go to college, but I really learned how to work. I learned how to organize my day. I learned how to do all these things, and I think one of the things that I became one of the things I learned to overcome that made me successful there was mitigate was the fear of failure, right? And the fear of, oh, I'm not going to be good at this, and just persisting and going with things despite that fear. And I think that's among other things, but I think that's a good example of something that I developed in a professional context that I think really lended itself here, that maybe other folks that have started younger didn't have that opportunity. For example, sending demos, self-releasing music, putting yourself out there, right? It's nerve-wracking. You're putting yourself, you're becoming vulnerable. You're putting yourself out there, and I think, at least in my version, I can't imagine myself having that easy of a time with it when I was 21 than how I did when I was 30, right? I'm 33 now. So I started right before I turned 30, or something like that. But, it wasn't 18, it wasn't 20. And I just think there was some life lessons that really helped me with that.
Yeah, we definitely take some of these sales skills out to the music industry. I have a friend, Juliana Karma, who's based in New York right now, and when she told me her story, there was a lot of cold calling tactics used when she was first starting to get her foot in the door at some gigs, and it's cool to see how we carry these lessons and tools with us. I mean, it's easy to think sometimes, oh, I wasted 5 years doing a soul-sucking job. But the reality is, in all of those moments, you're learning stuff and you're getting human experience that is going to carry with you into whatever your future endeavors are. So you talk about basically like persistence and fear of rejection. I know from my perspective in sales, really kind of got fed to the fire to just have to go through it. You could read all the sales books, but until you get hung up on for 4 weeks in a row and have your manager asking for updates, it's a different experience. Something that ties into that, maybe in a different way, as opposed to fear of external reception. How was your experience with self-doubt as an artist as you were progressing your craft?
Well, that's why I said mitigate the fear of failure, right? Not overcome it, because it's always there, right? And I think, so for me, if you look back at the last 2.5 years, I've self-released music, right? And that's me putting myself out there in like, hey, I'm the one at risk here. Like maybe someone likes the track, maybe people don't like the track, right? I think once I got signed, this project got signed with Inward. Um, Other people were now relying on my work and the performance of my work, and that was just a new dynamic that within myself I was really it induced anxiety at times, right? I was like, I just want to do well for them, right? They're taking a chance with me, I hope my work is good enough, right? Like I hope they don't regret doing
Yeah.
that, like just the internal voice, these things. I love that you kind of provide the platform for us to talk about, among other things, self or mindfulness and just mental health and of course music. But I think it was me coming in and getting connected with you and the Army of Love through music, but it also provided a platform for me to kind of share that story. But I think that that's my version. I think we all iteratively run, have some version of this, right? Whether it's just you know imposter syndrome in a job you have, or maybe like me, you're trying to change, right? You're trying to go do something new. It's like, are you good enough? Like, what are you doing, right? Like having this, along the way, having different versions of that and being able to overcome that. I would also say my ability to kind of manage that came with my age, right? Or, whatever the maturity, however you were measuring it. But I think, going through some versions of that in tech, especially not finishing college and working in a place where people have master's degrees from MIT and shit like that, I it was another thing that helped me, but it was still there. It still created anxiety, if I'm being honest, right?
Yeah, and it was beautiful. I remember you messaged me that you had something kind of deep to chat about, and we then offered that as a Zoom meeting within the Army of Love community, and like 6 or 7 people showed up, and everybody could relate in their own way to what you were describing. And then also, they were able to offer pieces of advice from their personal experience. And I think in the end, it came down to, hey, we want to give you the space to feel how you feel, not reject that. But in the bigger picture, these record labels, like, you're providing them with the content that ultimately they're distributing. I mean, you are the talent. It's not like they're doing you a favor and releasing your music. They are in alignment with what you created, and this is to be celebrated. But it's sweet that you have this side of you that is concerned and doesn't want to let anyone down. And I think ultimately, in the bigger picture, the path from my experience as it comes to like working with others or releasing content and how it's going to be received and stuff like that, I try to always come back to my why and my intention and focus more on what I'm putting into these projects, rather than how it's received when it goes out. And if I'm really in tune with my intention, there's really not much more that's in my control. And then relinquishing the stress around those things out of your control, that's a lifetime practice that will always evolve and deepen as we get more sensitive and our experiences get more potent, which I'm certain there's some more of that in store for you. So to really be able to sit with it and honor it, not reject it and take the bottle to numb it, but to show up to a couple trusting homies and say, hey, like, this is how I felt about this. That was really cool, and I appreciate you bringing that to the table. We all learned something from that day.
Yeah, I think I definitely recognize that might help folks and make it relatable, and maybe again age maturity. Like I don't have to pretend like it's something else. Like I'm just gonna be honest about how I felt in the process. Maybe other people find value in it, and so I think it might have helped. So I'm glad that I had the platform that you shared, and to put that out there for the rest of the crew.
tell us a little bit about this EP and just your music style in general. I first was introduced to your music by a mix that you submitted that was all your productions. And it caught me at the right time. I was just coming out of a yoga class. It was a nice day. I put it on with a no skipping mentality, and I really enjoyed myself the whole way through. And it was a moment where I was like, ooh, this guy wants to be friends, and I really like what he's creating, so this is exciting for me. And then after that, we connected on our love for R&B and such. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about how
Yeah.
you would, I don't even like to say describe, but how does your style feel to you? And what was putting this EP together like? And we would also like to know, how did you get it to the record label? How did that final connection happen?
Yeah, I can talk about this forever, but I'll give you the abridged version. So I've always loved music. I grew up in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, very rich in culture. We had
Thistle.
like a lot exactly like a big Mac Dre fan, listening to hi-fi music and R&B like we talked about. Like those two things really kind of consumed me in my formative years, and like many folks in this area, and that was a huge inspiration for me. But as I when I got married, actually, or before, when I met my wife, my now wife, she was into raving and going, and so she started taking me to
Good
these
work.
raves and stuff. And so I started really falling in love with like house music. But then as we got older, she started listening to like I guess what they might call organic house, like All Day I Dream and like Soul Selectas, and she really introduced me to that scene. And I started falling in love because I when I when I was 6, I moved from Brazil to the United States, and there's a lot of percussive, I guess generally speaking, kind of like organic sounds that are used in that type of music, real
Yeah.
instruments. And so I felt this like it felt familiar, right? It just kind of connected, like, oh, they're using like real instruments in the house music, and this is so cool. But they're also like integrating that like house kind of drive to it, but it's slower. And so I was like, okay, I like R&B and I like the tempo of R&B, but I like house music, and I'm hearing it kind of like it started connecting like that. So I went from kind of like initially just like making like tech housey sampling rap type of music to like, how do I slow this down and how do I incorporate real. Oh, and by the way, I love minimalism, so like throw that into the mixing pot, right? And so I said, and I started just working towards like, how do I make all these things work together in a cohesive way. And I think this project was really the first time, not I think, I know this is the first time I made a project and I was like, this is really the sound that this is representing like what I had in my head, or the closest to that, that I've ever been. And so I felt so good about it, and I sent it to a bunch of people for feedback, professionals, audiophile friends of mine, and I was like, hey, I think this is kind of it. And I was already sending demos out to labels, but I sent this one out, and I found out about Inward Records because Pippi and Sparrow and Barbosa, they came together and they started this label. So I knew the artists, and so I saw that they put a label together, and I said, "Oh, this is cool." And they do more like Afro house, but also organic house type of stuff. And so they like the real instruments and incorporate that a lot in the artists they release, or that release on that label also do that. So it made sense in my head. And so I reached out to them on Instagram to get to the second part of your question. Say, hey, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of the artists and the founders, and I'm also just really digging the vibes. Let me know if you guys are ever accepting demos. And then they responded like, thank you. And just a quick aside, and that's the beauty of this space. It's people are super accessible. It's not the biggest. It's not like reaching out to Kanye or someone, right? It's So no, but they responded. They were grateful. It's like, hey, actually, yeah, send in a demo anytime, and they had an email, and so I put this project. This project was already together, right? I was like, hey, let me send that latest and greatest to these guys, and I sent that, and the next morning, like I never expected. I didn't know what to expect, right? This is the first time I had a label respond and said, "Hey, this is a great EP. Like, yeah, let's go." I'm just like, "Holy shit, dude! Like, it's happening." And so that's kind of how that played out, and this was actually a year ago almost. And I'm learning about the sausage making and the release schedules, but I didn't mind the wait at all. I'm just super grateful that it worked out. I'm super grateful that you know they their vision aligned with the vision that I have for my music. It just made sense. So I'm super excited, and I'm super excited that Inward is where this initial project landed.
The artwork they blessed you with is serious.
Oh, dude, I'm so happy. I'm so grateful. And I told them, I'm like, dude, I can't wait for people to see it. It's
really, really, really nice. And I shared with you, I was going to say not that it matters, but I guess it kind of does. When I'm scanning and researching music, the artwork plays a big role in what catches my eye. And generally speaking, some labels just have what feels like a very cheap text. And it doesn't mean that the music is going to correlate to that, but oftentimes it kind of feels like it does. And I find that labels that invest in artists to create intentional artwork generally tend to be a bit more on the artsy side, a little less commercial. And that's what I found in my experience. So when I see a really crafty artwork, it does catch my eye. So I'm very happy that your project is paired with a very nice piece of art. We'll flash up some screenshots here, but that's cool, man.
No, I totally agree, and I'm glad that it part of the entire experience, right? It's not nothing, right? So I definitely am also very excited about it. Just one quick other thing that came with this experience that was surreal and new was there is a remix done by an artist named Bikondo, who has released on Inward previously, and that's another thing in itself, like seeing another artist take my work, be inspired by it enough to go and like create, take my vision and interpret it in the way that made sense for him and his style, and that having that kind of come in and lock in with the rest of the project, like kind of really was like the icing on the cake in a lot of ways for me. I was like, wow, this is, this feels so official. This is so cool, and I really fell in love with the remix too. So there was a lot of firsts in this, and a lot of really exciting things, and that's just one I wanted to call out as well.
In the remix process, what are you sending over? What are you sending over to the remixer? Is it just the track? Is it the stems? Is it the breakdown in Ableton?
I sent the stems.
Okay, and what are the stems in a brief explanation?
Yeah, so the stems are, you have different instruments that are played to compose the track. It's basically sending each of those files separately so they can go and isolate and process those things differently and chop them up, or really kind of manipulate them in a more granular way than having like a track that they can't go and separate things. It just makes it easier to work, and more control for the remixer.
I call them, to reference our IT sales world, line items. You sent all the line items.
Yeah.
Where did your name come from? And I know you mentioned to me personally that a few people have sort of suggested, I guess we could say, for you to change your name. What's that all about? Encouraged.
Yeah. So if you meet me, or if you have met me, I think one of the things is I'm not a very serious person, for better or for worse. Like I'm kind of goofy and silly. And my name is Goofy and Silly, right? It's Dummy Splash. And the meaning of it really is it's really kind of a tip of the hat to my Bay Area roots because we have our own vernacular, our own slang in the Bay Area. And so, we'll say words like hella, or we'll say, it's like to say a lot or very, say that's hella good, right? And another version of that is we'll say that's dumb good, or like dummy good. It's and so and then I have a friend of mine who my friend of mine who you know the term like creating a splash, like they
Right.
created a splash, and he kind of just bastardized that and was like, that's so splash, like he's like that was a total splash, like what a splash. He just started using it, or he even uses that like
Yep.
adjectives and stuff. He'd be like, this splash ass dude over there,
Ha!
right? And so I just thought it was so funny, and like I started using it a lot, and I got some people around me saying it, so I was just like, it was just such a goofy, like playful name. It's like I'm just Dummy Splash,
Yeah.
right? And so that's really like it actually does mean something to me. It's really kind of where talking about where I'm from, right? And it's kind of it can be an odd name for people that don't have that context. I can see that, right? And I think that's where these people who mean well suggested the name change. They're like, some of these people, their names are in Sanskrit, and like it's a different audience than maybe these Bay Area kids you hang out with. And I'm like, it's fine because it's still me, right? It's authentic.
Were these people in the electronic music scene?
Yes. Not professionally, but people who listen to electronic music, people who go to like Burning Man and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So if that's electronic scene or adjacent,
Yeah,
I don't know,
adjace.
but yeah, but that's and by the way, just to be clear, like I think they mean well, right? It was like, hey man, have you thought that maybe this could be a handicap to what you're doing? And I said perhaps, but at least it's honest, at least it's authentic, right? And I really and it doesn't feel right. Like there's not a single bone in my body who wants to change the name.
Right.
So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk through that somewhere, right? Because it, it is a goofy name, but that's who we're talking to.
For what it's worth, I love the name. And when it first came into our music sharing profile and you sent that set, I was like, all right, Dummy Splash, let's see what's up. I also come from a bit of a hip hop background, so maybe it was flowing with me a little differently, but nonetheless, the name remains the same.
Sure.
Dummy Splash forever.
Yeah.
So last thing I want to talk about, we were just chatting about it earlier. You've lived in San Francisco for a while, and you just moved out, way out of the big city. Where are you? Is it called Grass Valley?
Yeah, it's Grass Valley. It's in California, essentially between Sacramento and Lake Tahoe. It's 2.5 hours from San Francisco.
How do you feel the difference in your environment has affected your human experience as a whole?
So it has. That's the high level answer. But, I grew up in the Bay Area. My adult life, I lived almost entirely in San Francisco, downtown San Francisco. And there's just a lot of stuff going on around you. There's a lot of activity. There's a lot of fun stuff to do. There's, a lot of great music comes through San Francisco, frankly, almost every weekend. A lot of friends come into town, hit me up like, hey man, I'm the guy who lives in San Francisco. I love hanging out with my friends. But I'm always, getting pulled into stuff, and I liked it. And I didn't really, that's not why I moved to the woods, but now that I live in the woods, I'm like, wow, I'm just like by myself. And there's no one's calling me. And this is kind of awesome. Like, not saying the other stuff isn't awesome, but just like, wow, this is such a different way. And it just, like I was saying earlier, it might be a product of age or maturity or where I am in my life, but I just really enjoy just being here at home, cozy with my pets and my wife. And if I want to get out, I go hike in the woods that are just down the road from me. And just it's a different way, and maybe some other day, in the future, I'll enjoy other things. But right now, this feels so right, and it gives me a lot more focus on the music, and it allows me to, with less distractions, work and make music and do all the things that matter in a way that I feel is clearer, right? I have a clearer head because there's not so much static around me.
Definitely makes a lot of sense. And I think oftentimes, from my experience, going to a more natural environment with a slower pace has offered the opportunity for me to become more present and really be grateful with less material things and more just a state of being, as you referred to. And then I found that going back to the city after spending time in these more slow paced environments, the city was intense, but that's not even what I wanted to bring. What I wanted to bring was that I was able to be more present in the beautiful offerings that these cities have available to us. So if you're just grinding at work all the time, and then you're going to a show on Friday and Saturday, and a lot of that is escaping, and that's your slowdown. When taking acid at a party on a Friday is your slowdown from your grinding work, it's like, wow, you're really not slowing down at all. But to go pick up the stuff, take the wife and the dog out to the woods, spend a couple of years out there, everything starts to shift a bit, and I think it brings a little bit more presence into all aspects of your life, which ultimately I'm finding now is the most valuable thing that a human can have, is the ability to be present. But everyone has their own journey with that. Brother, the music is incredible. I'm very proud of you. The Army of Love is like jazzed up to have someone who's really engaged and sharing themselves as a human within our community, to have such a beautiful release. And we're all inspired by it. I know I am deeply. And it's a pleasure to just come on here and chat with you. Is there anything you want to leave us with before we shut this down?
No, I'll just have to reciprocate the thanks, right? I think, what you've done with Army of Love and continue to do, and some of the things you teased to me about what you're trying to do in the future, is all really cool and inclusive. And I just, I love that you've shared this with me and the rest of the folks on there, and anyone that comes on there in the future. Like, really, though, I really appreciate that. And I can't wait to see the next stage of what you do, and what any part I can play in it.
For sure, brother. You are definitely playing a part. And we'll close the ceremony with a little touch on what you just said, because my future is very bright, and the Army of Love's future is very bright. I feel the same way about you, and there's this inclination to kind of say, like, I can't wait to see what you do next. And while that is true, boy, I am so grateful to be enjoying the present moment and those moments of self-doubt and all of these great teachers that come along our life path in the journey as we get to those future points. So the future's bright. We'll keep it that way. But right here, right now, my heart is full connecting with you and celebrating your release, brother. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Much love. April 1st in stores everywhere. Let's go.